As we turn now to our next story, almost unfathomable, but true, about art in a time of terror. Why don't you tell us your story, beginning that day, May 11th, 2004?
Well, that was a very dark day for me. I woke up that morning and found that my wife had died in her sleep.
The seized exhibition that we are hosting here at the Center for Post-Natural History debuted just before the case was going to begin. And it tries to tell the whole story of both the artworks that were being produced in the lab, as well as the story of the investigation. Here we have an invitation to the opening of the exhibition called the Interventionists, being hosted by Mass Mocha. This invitation was used as evidence in the hearing to get a warrant to search the home of Dr. Kurtz. And what they described to the judge was that they had found Arabic writings in the home of Dr. Kurtz.
You just have to remember the time of it, because so much of it was not really about art or art and science or artists or me or my history with activism or any of that. It was purely, I think, motivated by the times.
Former Soviet Union as well as Iraq had offensive biological weapons programs. The parties to the convention came together and felt that the convention needed to be strengthened through the inclusion of some sort of inspections regime.
We were at the height of terrorist hysteria, right? Security state in full swing.
At the time, I mean, it was not too long after Dick Cheney had said, everybody needs to duct tape their house off for fear of anthrax. That there was a kind of cultural fear, and I think they figured that you can use that fear to get grand jury indictments and stuff.
Right after 9/11, there was an artist named Steve Kurtz that was working with bacterial cultures, and his wife died in the middle of the night of a heart attack. And when the EMTs came and saw petri dishes, they called the police, who called the FBI, and it turned into this giant incident.
Along with the medical people and the coroner, the police came too. The murder detectives showed up. Needless to say, my house was pretty weird to them. I doubt that they have had much contact with artists, particularly ones that had science equipment in their house. I told them my explanation was that, well, I'm a professor of art, and one of the areas I explore is the relationship of art and science. And they seemed somewhat okay with that. It really could have all ended that day. The coroner came and said she died of natural causes. It's as clear as day. That should have been it. That should have been it. Everyone should have gone home. But someone called the FBI, said I had science stuff.
So they started to suspect him of being a bioterrorist. Why would an artist? Why would anyone who's not a biologist? Why would even somebody do it in their home, to have this stuff, unless they were up to no good?
Hello.
Hi, Claire. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good.
Can I help you?
Yes. We would just like to provide you with this.
What's your name again? I forgot.
My name is Joel Mercer. I work for the FBI in the Buffalo office.
I'm leaving the house to go to the funeral home, and I don't know, 3 or 4 cars full of FBI agents come and get me. They line up, and they all tell me how bad they feel that I lost my wife. I was like, yeah, okay. And then it's like, well, we're going to need to keep you here for a little while. Is that okay? And I was like, yeah, I guess. So I'm sitting there, and I was like, well, I need to go to the store and get some cigarettes. I was supposed to be going to the funeral home, and they're like, you can't go get cigarettes. I was like, why not? I'm not under arrest. Why can't I go? And they said, well, you're being detained.
And so began kind of this week of them raiding my house and seizing materials. They did leave us quite a bit of trash behind between the wetware from the testing that was bundled up and left all over my home to the piles of trash left outside, primarily consisting of Gatorade bottles and pizza boxes.
This is one of the prints from the exhibition. It was previously a fairly expensive sterile white print, but you can see these boot prints kind of all over it. Most of the artworks that were in the show were treated similarly.
Was harrowing for Steve. I mean, to be under investigation or pending trial, and this went on for 4 years, is really harrowing, and it breaks people down. But he had so much support, and we used it as a kind of platform to talk about the things that we were doing work about anyway. All these artists and friends were mobilized for a defense team because Steve was not going to plead.
What happens to me affects the sphere of the art world tremendously, which is why this auction happened that we raised $167,000 for. We all know what's at stake. It's the institution. It's not just me personally.
When it finally went to trial, the judge threw it out and said, this is no merit, this case. After, the government spent millions of dollars on this case.
I mean, it was just totally lame. You see what happens. You have all these people employed to look for bad terrorists, and they've got nothing to do except prosecute.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's a story that is really emblematic of overreach. Unlike the other cases, this was a case in which the FBI got something back.
Freedom of speech, freedom of research, freedom of knowledge, freedom of speech, freedom of research, freedom of knowledge, freedom of speech.
It just launched so much resistance against this kind of overreach that at least in the case of DIYBio, the FBI realized it made some very serious mistakes.
After the case, the FBI adopted a somewhat different strategy in terms of independent labs and people with labs in their homes.
This is the trajectory of our relationship with the FBI. We reached out to them. We went up to them after they presented at the meeting and said, we're starting a group in New York. We don't want any misunderstandings. And that was the start of a long relationship that we've had with them and that the community has had with them.
Ed Yu was an agent in their bioterrorism task force, and he approached me and a bunch of other people in the community very early on. The FBI invited DIYBio community members to meet, and sort of half of the meeting was what the FBI's role is in biosecurity, national biosecurity, and 2 was for us to educate them about what is DIYBio.
The most interesting thing about the conference was the testimony of the FBI agents. A lot of what the FBI agents told us about their involvement or their interest in DIYBio had to do with the way the old FBI used to do business as opposed to the way the new FBI does business. Prior to 9/11, the old FBI would just break down your door if you were in violation. wouldn't say they want to be friends with people, but they want to establish some kind of relationship. What kind of relationship is it possible to have with the FBI? I mean, they're not going to invite you over to watch the Super Bowl. You can either be a suspect, or you can be an informant, or you can be convicted, or you can be a fugitive. And so I would say that most people in DIYBio are either suspects or informants.
Basic genetic engineering is now within the reach of do-it-yourself amateurs.
You just can't really predict where the imagination of somebody creative will lead them in terms of solving a problem that's societal or scientific or environmental.
Or maybe creating problems, if the biohacker is so inclined.
No, seriously, I don't understand what the fear is. I mean, I do and I don't. I understand that people have these exaggerated ideas of what's possible when someone with very little training comes into a lab, and they envision all sorts of doomsday scenarios.
Attacks may be made in many ways.
Creating a pathogen is quite difficult. If you think of the number of really deadly human viruses there are in the world and the different chances they have to evolve, you realize that even nature has a hard time making a really deadly pathogen.
Those types of headlines about sort of engineering a virus that could then be released and then sort of, kill an entire city are asinine in my perspective. I think it's just a misunderstanding of what's actually happening in the community. Currently, I work primarily on our synthetic biology project. We actually polled the DIY community to find out what types of experiments they were actually doing. And what we found was the actual data of what people were doing in the community just did not match, in essence, what was being portrayed in the press. 92% of the people at some time or another are working in some type of community setting, which also goes against sort of a lot of the press that's out there, that it's this lone person in their basement sort of tinkering with biology for some nefarious purpose. We had a statistician actually run the numbers on it, and the DIY community is actually more educated than the general population is. So that also debunks a lot of the sort of myths out there, that the people within the community just have no idea what they're doing and they're just tinkering, right? One of the main projects that people are working on are educational projects. While yes, you could envision in a few years that the technical capability of someone being able to manipulate a virus will probably be there, we have to remember that that's a criminal activity, and that is something that's completely separate from the DIYBio community.
In the early stages, the discussion was focused on bioterrorism and creating some super plague virus. There was a missed opportunity to have a real conversation about creating basic infrastructure and increasing the availability of these technologies to people.
I think if there's any danger to people in DIYBio from the FBI, it's probably to bioartists, people who are right there on the cutting edge, pushing the boundaries, and really exploring that line between the social and the technical. That's probably who I would be most worried for.
There used to be a time in this country where DIY science, of whatever kind, was thought to be a great idea. But as the security state grew and they realized this could empower people, the more that became discouraged. To see that there are labs out there, that there are people doing biology in the same way as Astronomy Club, and nobody's getting killed, it's not attracting terrorists, right? No kind of conspiratorial planning is happening at these sites. That's a good thing. It helps to kind of deflate the fear a little bit.
Most of the people in the scientific community that I talk to about the DIY community find it fascinating, and it reminds them of why we got involved in science to begin with, because it was fun, there was exploration involved, And that's what I see the DIY community sort of bringing back.
So I want everyone to know exactly what this technology is, what it does, what its limitations are, what its potential is, and enter the dialogue from a position of understanding rather than complete ignorance and fear. Because once you're afraid of something and you don't know what it is, then anyone can control you.